So Dr. Mmusi Maimane is not having it. He's just fired off an email to Treasury saying, I want to see every receipt, every expenditure, what's going on with the public purse and the national dialogue. In this video, I'm going to show you what's going on with that situation. But if you stay with me until my biblical reaction, you may find that you have a role to play because we have decided that South Africa will prosper. You ready? Good. Press like. Let's go. Let's start with the fake Mmusi Maimane, who is about to tell us something about government expenditure and our money. Listen.
You see, the budget that people were talking about, 700 million and so on, it was a budget prepared by the preparatory task team. It's not a government budget. The conceptual framework of how that the dialogue is going to be funded was that 60% will be funded by government from the fiscus and 40% will be funded in cash and in kind by donors. The question was, what is this budget all about? It's a very important question. The most of the money that has been budgeted for, and it's still a budget, there's no finality because in terms of the government component, Treasury is still discussing with the state. Most of the money is going to fund community dialogues, which are going to happen at wards, sectoral, in a way. So it is expected that we're going to have 3 dialogues per ward for the duration. I think it comes to like 18,600 dialogues. That is where the issues are going to be taking place. That's where ordinary people are going to be discussed about the South Africa they want, the vision of the South Africa they want.
Okay, so before I take you to the real Maimane, the one we voted for, this happened after the legacy foundations pulled out of the national dialogue. I mean, Bishop Tutu pulled out, FW de Klerk pulled out, Tabo Mbeki pulled out, O.R. Tambo pulled out, Albert Luthuli pulled out through their foundations, and they said because there's no transparency amongst other things. But is President Ramaphosa discouraged? Never!
Next week will take place as planned. This is according to President Ramaphosa. He noted the concerns raised by some of the national legacy foundations, which included Tabo Mbeki, Steve Biko, Chief Albert Luthuli, and the Desmond and Tutu legacy foundations. The president says the upcoming national convention is meant to deal with the modalities of the national dialogue.
The first convention really is not going to deal with the substantive issues. It is going to deal with the process, how the other dialogues are going to happen in various districts in our country, in various wards in our country. So the first convention will then be choosing a steering committee that will take the work forward. We'll also get involved in planning how that process will evolve.
He says, come next Friday, nothing will stand in the way of the planning process for the national dialogue. He argues that such initiatives often encounter hiccups and that the focus must remain on the outcomes of the national dialogue. Ramaphosa also said he would give the opening address on the first day of the convention.
The withdrawal of the foundations is not a train smash. The dialogue is going to go ahead. The people of South Africa want the dialogue to go ahead. And of course, with an undertaking of this nature, there will always be hiccups here and there, and various other dialogues that we've held in the past, be it the drafting of our constitution, even with the drafting of the Freedom Charter. There were some hiccups here and there, but what mattered was the outcome.
So he's pretty much saying, Guys, be careful. Remember Terre Blanche drove in through the windows? Tabo Mbeki may just drive through the windows of the Friday convention. So the first National Dialogue big convention is happening on Friday. They're steaming right ahead. But now, after the foundations pulled out, the real Mmusi Maimane, the real chairperson of the Appropriations Committee, fired off his email. Listen.
Well, let's speak further then about the National Dialogue. Bring in Mmusi Maimane, Chairperson of Parliament's Standing Committee on Appropriations, because you've got a statement out this evening raising concerns basically about funding as well as implementation of the National Dialogue process. Doctor, why are you worried?
First of all, any money that is used for public, that is being drawn from the public, must be accounted for and can only be adjudicated through an act of Parliament. And therefore, when you want to spend 500 million rands, our question as a committee is, when the budget was tabled, this item was not specified in the budget. Secondly, when you move funds to the value of between 500 to 700 million rands, you need to indicate to South Africans which programs are you stopping and where you're taking those funds from. This is not the president's money. This is South Africans' money. And therefore, Parliament must be given the full oversight thereof. And to this effect, I've written to National Treasury, to the Minister of Finance, to come and brief the people of South Africa, Parliament, as to where these funds are coming through and how they are being actually decided upon. Because we can't just give a blank check to a national dialogue without knowing where these funds are coming from, how they're going to work, and ultimately who is going to be at the receiving end of the lack of funds when this program is concluded.
So a statement from the presidency issued Sunday, which was yesterday, said that it confirms that all budgetary processes regarding the National Convention, which is at the end of this week, are consistent with the Public Finance Management Act. Are you in possession of information of information at this stage to the contrary?
No, the fundamental issue is that the Public Finance Management Act only triggers in when you are procuring services, so booking venues and all of that. That's not the question I'm raising. The question I'm raising is to say, where did the president get the money in the first place? Where does it come from? The president's budget is already been voted for in Parliament. It tells us that they've got this amount to spend. None of the programs that were articulated in there included a national dialogue, not ones that we have seen. Therefore, unless there was costs that were built in that we need to be able to see, we need to understand this. Because in the same way, I'll use a practical example. When the state decided that it would go to court on the ICJ case, 3 departments had to be incorporated: Justice, Presidency, and I think the Department of International Relations. They took money from multiple programs and then wanted and funded the court case. Where is the funding for the national dialogue coming from is the question that must be upheld. It's got nothing to do with the PFMA. It's got everything to do with making sure that the people's money, that 2.1 trillion rand that we voted for as Parliament, is accounted for.
So at an appropriations level then, is it likely, or can it be, now that you've written to Treasury, for example, seeking answers, do you think you'll be able to get these answers, satisfactory answers, by Friday, which is when this first convention is meant to sit?
It is absolutely crucial that we do, or otherwise what it would mean is that it would give the executive the right to spend money, not have it voted for in Parliament, and then after that come to Parliament later post facto. We are simply saying that Parliament must take up its stance, it must take up its position, and National Treasury must be able to furnish us with the full details. The letter I have written to them requires urgent intervention, and ultimately we want to make sure that there's transparency and accountability. The only place National Treasury and the Ministry of Finance are accountable and transparent is at Parliament. It's nowhere else. It's not in the media. It's not to in the Lakota. It's where the people are represented, which is in Parliament. And I urge again, if we really are serious about safeguarding the people's money, let the Presidency and National Treasury come and account before the Appropriations Committee.
And would the Presidency and Treasury have fallen foul of their responsibilities, their obligations to a committee such as yours if these answers are not in by Friday? And if so, what mechanism would that trigger, for instance?
Well, by law, you need to understand when a vote is being put together and you move funds, if you move beyond 8% of the total budget, then that means you can only do that through a vote in Parliament. Moving funds is possible only if it's below 8% is what the law prescribes. Therefore, we need to get these first preliminary questions to understand whether they've complied with the law. And if it's up to 8% and there's a budget vote that is the program that they've moved the funds for, then we can be able to all agree that yes, the funds can be used, but secondly, this program will not exist. And some of these programs might be the presidential employment stimulus or other programs that sit within the presidency. But again, in the absence of knowing where the funds are being taken from, which budget vote, whether it's presidency, whether it's cooperative governance, it's still unclear to Parliament where these funds are effectively coming from.
So despite then those concerns around funding and implementation, am I right in saying that you ultimately still support the national dialogue? One of the quotes I was looking at was you apparently calling it a pivotal moment for South Africa to reflect, reset and rebuild. Is there a cost too high?
It is a moment in time in our nation where, as we've always maintained, the dialogue is something we called for a long time ago. But what needs to happen is, like any other intervention, it cannot have a blank check and it cannot do things that fall foul of the legal provisions as to how we spend the people's money.
How much money is too much money?
The facts are, the presidency budget is allocated, and I'll get the exact figure on that. But the reality of it is, when you think about 500 million rands, for argument's sake, that's R500 million, you've got to pit it against programs. Could that money be used in a presidential stimulus, in whatever the other programs that the presidency is engaged with? That will have to be measured against. If it's a long-term, sustainable, civic society-led organization that is not led politically, then I do think it's a necessary intervention. But if it becomes something that is captured and used for political purposes, then I certainly think even 100 rands would be too much money.
Mmusi Maimane, Chairman of Parliament's Standing Committee on Appropriations.
There we go. If it's 10 rands used fakely to prop up the ANC, it's too much. So he says, where is the money coming from? My biblical reaction. If you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? If you remember how this happened, on the 12th of June, you sent an email to non-GNU parties saying, please withdraw from the national dialogue right now. This is nonsense. The DA was the only party that had the guts to stand up, be unpopular, and pulled out. Would they have pulled out if you had not written that letter? Who knows? They pulled out after Whitfield was fired. They fell under fire. Tabo Mbeki wrote a 50-page letter chastising them. President Ramaphosa, in front of another president, abused Steenhuisen, all in these videos that are popping up right now. Then you followed up with a parliament submission which went to Mmusi Maimane's committee as well, demanding exactly what he's demanding, saying, please, you are our voice. Tell us what's going on. Where's the money coming from? Would the legacy guys have pulled out if you hadn't sent that letter quoting most of what you had in your submission, especially because news gets around in these legacy circles? Who knows? Maybe you have come for such a time as this. But if you keep quiet, help will have to come from another place. So don't keep quiet. No man can serve two masters, because either you love the one and hate the other, or he will despise the one and be loyal to the other. You cannot serve God and Karl Marx. So let's make history together. Cheers.